A single obsidian cufflink nestled in the plush carpet of his private jet. It wasn't his. For Ava Christensen, that tiny gleaming object was a key that unlocked a hidden room in her perfect marriage, revealing a scene of devastating betrayal. She was 6 months pregnant, living a life most people could only dream of, married to the billionaire, Titan Nathaniel Forrester. But in one night, that dream shattered. This isn't just a story about heartbreak. It's the story of how one woman took that shattered life and with a single transatlantic phone call, walked away from billions, faced down the man who broke her, and built an empire of her own from the ashes. The air in the penthouse was always the same. A sterile, climate-controlled 72 degrees, tinged with the faint, expensive scent of white gardenias that were replaced every 2 days. It was a beautiful prison, perched 57 floors above the ceaseless thrum of New York City. From here, the world looked like a glittering map of possibilities. But for Ava Christensen, it had begun to feel like the edge of a very small, very luxurious world. Her life on paper was an urban fairy tale. At 31, she was a former architect with a promising career she'd paused, the wife of Nathaniel Forrester, the self-made tech and logistics magnate whose net worth fluctuated with the market, but always stayed comfortably in the 10-figure range. And she was 6 months pregnant with their first child, a son. Nate was a force of nature. He was handsome in a way that seemed engineered for magazine covers. Sharp jaw, piercing blue eyes that could crinkle with disarming charm or narrow with chilling focus. He had conquered the business world with a blend of ruthless ambition and irresistible charisma. When he had turned that charisma on Ava at a gallery opening 3 years ago, she'd felt like the only person in a crowded room. He'd loved her mind, he'd said, her eye for structure and beauty, the quiet confidence she exuded. He'd made her believe she wasn't just marrying a billionaire. She was entering a partnership of equals. Lately, though, the partnership felt increasingly one-sided. Late nights at the office became the norm, his explanations for missed dinners vague but plausible. Closing the Axiom deal, sweetheart. It's a monster. Or, the board is flying in from Singapore. Have to prep. She'd tried to be the supportive wife, the understanding partner. She'd rub his shoulders when he came home at 2 a.m., smelling of stale coffee and the electric ozone of a high-stakes office, and try to ignore the other, fainter scent that sometimes clung to his suit jacket. A floral, musky perfume she couldn't place. The doubts were whispers at first, easy to dismiss as hormonal anxiety. Pregnancy was making her insecure, she told herself. Nate was under immense pressure, but the whispers grew louder, fed by small, unsettling inconsistencies. A receipt from a restaurant he'd never mentioned, dated on a night he was supposedly working through dinner. A newfound interest in a genre of art he'd previously called pretentious drivel, which happened to be championed by a certain socialite, Kendall Monroe. Kendall was everything Ava wasn't, sleek, polished, and ambitious, with a razor-sharp smile and a reputation for leveraging her connections with surgical precision. She was a rising star in the finance world, often quoted in the same business journals as Nate. Ava had met her a few times at galas. Kendall had a way of looking at her, a flicker of something between pity and contempt in her eyes, that always left Ava feeling cold. Nate had laughed it off. She's just intense, Ava. All business. You shouldn't take it personally. The discovery happened on a Tuesday. Nate had just returned from a 2-day trip to Chicago to finalize the Axiom merger. He'd swept into the apartment, kissed her deeply, and placed a hand on her growing belly. How are my two favorite people? He'd murmured, his voice a low, reassuring rumble. He was tired but triumphant. The deal was done. He was on top of the world. He'd left his briefcase and travel bag near the door, rushing to take a shower before they had to leave for a charity dinner. Ava, wanting to do something wifely and helpful, decided to unpack his bag for him. It was a simple domestic act. She sorted the laundry, set aside his worn copy of Meditations, and was about to zip the bag shut when her fingers brushed against something small and hard in a side pocket. Curious, she pulled it out. It was a velvet jeweler's box, a deep navy blue from a boutique on Madison Avenue she didn't recognize. Her heart gave a hopeful flutter. Was it a surprise for her? A thank you for being patient gift. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it. Inside, nestled on a bed of white satin, was a single cufflink. It was custom-made, a disc of polished obsidian set in platinum, with a tiny, almost invisible diamond chip in the center. It was exquisite, modern, and powerful. And it wasn't Nate's. Nate's style was classic, old money, gold, monograms, simple knots. This was not his. Ava stood frozen, the box in her hand feeling impossibly heavy. It was the missing piece to a puzzle she hadn't even realized she was solving. The lingering perfume, the late nights, the sudden interest in modern art. It all clicked into place with the horrifying finality of a deadbolt sliding home. This wasn't just a cufflink. It was a trophy, a secret. She heard the shower turn off. Her mind raced. Confront him? He'd lie. He was a masterful liar, capable of weaving narratives so convincing he probably believed them himself. She needed more. She needed undeniable proof. Putting the box back in his bag, a cold, terrifying calm settled over her. The hurt was a physical thing, a crushing weight in her chest. But beneath it, the architect in her mind was already at work, assessing the structural integrity of her life and finding it rotten to the core. Later that day, while Nate was on a conference call in his home office, she did something she had never done before. She went to his closet and opened the hidden safe where he kept important documents. The code was their anniversary. The irony was a bitter pill. Inside, among stock certificates and property deeds, was a folder labeled KM Ventures. Her blood ran cold. KM, Kendall Monroe. Inside wasn't a business proposal. It was the deed to a condominium at 15 Central Park West, one of the most exclusive addresses in the city, purchased 3 months ago, in Kendall Monroe's name, but paid for by a shell corporation that Ava, with a few quick searches using skills from her due diligence days in architecture, traced back to a subsidiary of Forrester Industries. He hadn't just bought his mistress a gift. He had bought her a home, a stone's throw from their own. But the final, soul-crushing blow came when she logged onto the jet charter portal Nate used. His flight from Chicago had been logged, but there was an unusual detail. The plane hadn't come directly from Teterboro Airport. It had made an unscheduled 1-hour stop that morning, in Aspen, where Kendall Monroe had been posting glamorous skiing photos on her private Instagram account for the past week. Ava sank onto the floor of their cavernous walk-in closet, surrounded by Nate's perfectly tailored suits and her own collection of beautiful dresses that now felt like costumes. The air was thick with the scent of leather and cedar, but all she could smell was the phantom fragrance of betrayal. The cufflink wasn't from a business meeting. It was from a secret rendezvous, a romantic mountain getaway. He had flown from his mistress's bed to his pregnant wife's home and hadn't even bothered to hide the evidence. The arrogance of it was breathtaking. The tears that came weren't loud or hysterical. They were silent, hot tears of rage and disillusionment. The man she loved didn't exist. He was a fiction, a character Nate Forrester played to perfection. The life she was living was a lie, a gilded cage built on a foundation of deceit. And in that moment, Ava Christensen knew the cage had to be broken. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now. The charity gala that evening was at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. It was the kind of event that choked the surrounding streets with black cars and flashbulbs, a glittering spectacle of New York's elite. Ava stood in front of the full-length mirror in their bedroom, a vision in an emerald silk gown that draped artfully over her baby bump. The Christensen diamond, a flawless 15-karat yellow diamond Nate had given her for their first anniversary, sat cold and heavy against her skin. She looked the part of the billionaire's adoring wife. Inside, she was a stranger in her own body, a general planning a war. Nate came up behind her, sliding his arms around her waist. He rested his chin on her shoulder, his reflection smiling beside hers in the mirror. "Look at you," he whispered, his voice warm with what she now knew was practiced affection. "My beautiful wife, the mother of my son. You're glowing." Ava met his eyes in the mirror. The blue was as clear and empty as a winter sky. She forced a smile that felt like cracking porcelain. Just trying to keep up with my husband, the man of the hour. The evening was a masterclass in deception. Ava smiled, laughed at the mayor's terrible jokes, and discussed nursery color palettes with the wives of board members. She touched Nate's arm, let him place a proprietary hand on the small of her back, and played her part flawlessly. Every smile was a lie, every polite nod a strategic move. She watched him work the room, a king in his court, accepting congratulations for the Axiom deal. She saw Kendall Monroe across the vast hall, a slash of crimson in a sea of black tie. Kendall caught her eye for a moment and gave a small, triumphant smirk before turning back to her conversation. It was a declaration. I won. The confirmation was so blatant, so arrogant, it didn't even hurt anymore. It was fuel. Ava excused herself, claiming fatigue, a convenient and believable excuse for a pregnant woman. Nate, ever the doting husband in public, insisted on sending her home in his private car. I'll be right behind you, sweetheart. Just have to glad hand a few more investors. Back in the silent penthouse, Ava didn't change out of her gown. She walked directly into Nate's home office, a sleek, minimalist space of glass and steel overlooking the city. Her first call was to Zoe Barnes, her best friend since college. Zoe was a fiercely loyal, no-nonsense litigation lawyer who had always been skeptical of Nate's perfect facade. Zoe, Ava said, her voice steady and clear, I need you to listen very carefully. I'm leaving Nate tonight. I need you to find me the most ruthless, effective divorce attorney in this city. Someone who eats men like Nate for breakfast, and I need everything filed by morning. There was a moment of stunned silence on the line, then, Ava, what happened? Are you okay? I've never been more okay, Ava said, a strange sense of clarity washing over her. He's been having an affair with Kendall Monroe. It's not new, it's not a fling. It's a whole other life. I have proof. I'll forward you everything. That son of a bitch, Zoe hissed. I knew it. Okay, Ava. Okay, I'm on it. Robert Davies. He's a shark with a law degree. Where are you going? That's the next part, Ava said, her eyes scanning the flight schedules on Nate's massive monitor. I'm leaving the country. I can't be here for this. He'll try to manipulate me, to charm his way out of it. I need a clean break. She booked a one-way first-class ticket to Florence, Italy, departing from JFK in 3 hours. Florence was a place she'd loved during a semester abroad, a city of art, history, and resilience, a place to be reborn. Her next actions were swift and precise. She transferred half the money from their joint checking account, a substantial sum she was legally entitled to, into a new private account she had opened weeks ago under her maiden name, a just-in-case measure prompted by those first whispers of doubt. She packed one suitcase with essentials, comfortable clothes, her laptop, a few sentimental items, and all the financial documents she had found. She left the emerald gown puddled on the floor. She took off the Christensen diamond and placed it squarely in the center of Nate's pillow, a silent, glittering statement. As the car she'd called on a burner app sped towards JFK, her phone buzzed. It was Nate. She ignored it. It buzzed again and again. Finally, as she was checking in her bag, she answered. Ava, where are you? The driver said he dropped you off an hour ago. I was worried, he said, his voice a perfect blend of concern and authority. Ava walked toward the gate, finding a quiet corner. This was it, the severance. I'm at the airport, Nate, she said, her voice devoid of emotion. The airport? What are you doing there? Are you going somewhere? He sounded confused, a rare state for him. Yes, I am. Without telling me? Sweetheart, what's going on? Is it the baby? Are you okay? Ava laughed, a short, sharp, humorless sound. The baby is fine, but we're not. I know, Nate. I know everything. The silence on the other end was telling. For the first time, Nathaniel Forrester was speechless. I know about Kendall, she continued, her voice like ice. I know about the condo you bought her. I know about your little detour to Aspen this morning on the way back from Chicago. I know about the cufflink. Ava, listen to me, he started, his tone shifting from confusion to damage control. You're misunderstanding. It's not what you think. Kendall is complicated. It's a business thing, mostly. A business thing? She repeated, the audacity of the lie stealing her breath. Did you do business with her in the new condo? Was the Aspen trip a board meeting? Don't insult my intelligence, Nate. Don't you dare. Okay, he said, his voice dropping, becoming intimate, persuasive, the voice that had charmed her, that had closed billion-dollar deals. I messed up. I admit it. I am so sorry. It meant nothing, Ava. You and the baby are my world. It was a mistake, a stupid mistake. Please just come home and we can talk about this. We can fix this. I'll end it with her tonight. I'll do anything. This was the moment she had dreaded, the moment his powerful charisma would be aimed directly at her heart. But the heart he was aiming for was already shattered, and its pieces were razor sharp. There's nothing to talk about, she said calmly, as the boarding call for her flight echoed through the terminal. There's nothing to fix. You didn't make a mistake, Nate. You made a choice. You made hundreds of choices, every single day, to lie to me and disrespect me and our marriage. You built a whole other life behind my back while I was at home, carrying your son. Ava, don't be so dramatic, he snapped, the charm evaporating, replaced by the cold anger of a man who was losing control. You're pregnant. You're hormonal. You're not thinking clearly. You can't just leave. Watch me, she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, but it was a whisper that carried the force of a tectonic shift. I have a new bank account. I have a lawyer. His name is Robert Davies. You'll be hearing from him. And as of this phone call, our marriage is over. I want a divorce. You want a what? He sputtered, incredulous. You can't divorce me over the phone. That's not how this works. It's how it works for me, she said as she handed her boarding pass to the gate agent. You don't get a scene. You don't get to lie your way out of it. You get this. Goodbye, Nate. And with that, she hung up. She blocked his number, powered off her phone, and stepped onto the plane. As she found her seat and the cabin door sealed shut with a heavy thud, she didn't look back. She was flying away from the wreckage of her old life, towards an unknown future, with nothing but a suitcase, a healthy bank account, and the fierce, protective love for the unborn child who was now hers and hers alone. The descent into Florence was shrouded in a thick November fog, a gray, woolly blanket that obscured the famous terracotta rooftops and the rolling Tuscan hills. It was a fitting welcome. Ava's new life felt just as formless and uncertain. The adrenaline that had propelled her out of New York had faded during the 8-hour flight, leaving behind a bone-deep exhaustion and a hollow, aching grief. Stepping out of the Amerigo Vespucci airport, the air was cool and damp, carrying the scent of wet earth and diesel. It was a world away from the crisp, electric air of Manhattan. The language buzzed around her, a melodious but incomprehensible hum. For the first time, the full weight of her decision settled upon her. She was 31 years old, 6 months pregnant, and utterly alone in a foreign country. A wave of panic, cold and nauseating, washed over her. She had booked a room for a week at a small, elegant hotel overlooking the Arno River, a place she remembered from her student days. The room was beautiful, with frescoed ceilings and antique furniture, but it felt impersonal and vast. She unpacked her single suitcase, the meager contents a stark testament to the life she had jettisoned. The first few days were a blur of jet lag and sorrow. She would wake up when it was still dark, her body convinced it was the middle of the afternoon in New York. She would lie in the king-sized bed, one hand resting on her belly, feeling the gentle kicks of her son, and the tears would come. She cried for the marriage she thought she had, for the man she had loved, and for the future that had been stolen from her. She ate room service pasta that she barely tasted and stared out the window at the gray river, watching the city move on without her. Nate, as expected, had launched a full-scale assault. Her new phone, purchased at the airport, was bombarded with messages from his assistants, his lawyers, his mother and friends. She now realized were his friends, not theirs. They were all variations on a theme. Nate is devastated. This is a misunderstanding. Please come home. Think of the baby. He was trying to build a narrative of the hysterical, hormonal, pregnant wife, and it was terrifyingly effective. But Zoe was her anchor. They spoke every day. Robert Davies is a beast, Zoe reported with grim satisfaction on day 3. He's already filed a preliminary injunction to freeze half of all marital assets. Nate's team is screaming bloody murder. They're trying to paint you as unstable. We're painting you as a woman who discovered a massive systemic deception and removed herself and her unborn child from a toxic environment. Am I unstable, Zoe? Ava asked, her voice small, as she watched a lone rower slice through the murky water of the Arno. Ava, you are the most stable person I know. You just blew up a bridge because you saw it was rotten. That's not instability, that's controlled demolition. Now stop staring at the river and go do something. Find an apartment. You can't live in a hotel forever. Zoe was right. Wallowing was a luxury she couldn't afford. She had a new life to build, for herself and for her son. The next day, Ava forced herself out into the city. She wrapped herself in a warm coat and walked. She crossed the Ponte Vecchio, its glittering jewelry shops looking gaudy and meaningless. She wandered through the Oltrarno, the artisan quarter on the other side of the river. Here, the streets were narrower, the buildings older, the air filled with the sounds of workshops, the tap, tap, tap of a hammer on metal, the whine of a saw cutting through wood. She found herself drawn to the smell of leather. It led her to a small cluttered workshop on a quiet side street. The sign above the door was faded wood, reading Bianchi Pelletteria. Inside, an elderly man with a magnificent white mustache and hands gnarled by decades of work was meticulously stitching the handle onto a leather briefcase. He looked up as she entered. His eyes, magnified by thick glasses, were kind and curious. Buongiorno, he said, his voice raspy. Buongiorno, Ava replied, the Italian word feeling clumsy in her mouth. I'm just looking. Your work is beautiful. She ran a hand over a buttery soft tote bag. The craftsmanship was exquisite, every stitch perfect, the design simple but timeless. It reminded her of what she used to love, the beauty of well-made things, the integrity of good design. For a fleeting moment, she wasn't a runaway wife. She was an architect again, appreciating structure and form. She ended up buying a small leather-bound journal. As the man, Mr. Lorenzo Bianchi, wrapped it in brown paper, he asked, "You are American? Here on holiday?" "Something like that," Ava said evasively. "You look sad," he stated simply, not with pity, but with gentle observation. "Florence is a good city for sad people. It has seen everything. It knows how to wait for the sun to return." His words, simple and profound, struck a chord deep within her. She left the shop with the journal under her arm, feeling the first fragile flicker of something other than grief. Finding an apartment was her next task. She didn't want the city center, the tourist-clogged heart of Florence. She wanted a neighborhood, a community. An agent showed her a place in San Nicolo, nestled under the hill leading to Piazzale Michelangelo. It was on the top floor of an old building, with a rickety lift and no doorman. But it had a small terrace that offered a breathtaking, panoramic view of the Duomo and the Palazzo Vecchio. The apartment itself was modest, with terracotta floors, high-beam ceilings, and windows that let in floods of pale winter light. It was empty, a blank canvas. Standing on the terrace, feeling the cool breeze on her face, Ava made a decision. This would be home. It wasn't a penthouse. It wasn't a palace. It was real. The legal battle raged on, an ocean away. Nate's lawyers argued that she had fled the country in a state of emotional distress and that all decisions should be postponed until her recovery. Robert Davies countered with a mountain of evidence: the deed to the condo, the flight logs, printouts of Kendall's social media posts from Aspen. He fought for an expedited long-distance divorce, arguing that forcing Ava to return to New York would cause undue stress to her and the pregnancy. Ava spent her days navigating the labyrinth of Italian bureaucracy, getting a residency permit, opening a bank account, setting up utilities. It was frustrating and humbling. She was no longer Mrs. Forrester, whose name opened every door. She was Signora Christensen, a pregnant American woman struggling with a new language and a complex system. But every small victory, successfully ordering coffee in Italian, navigating the bus system, finding the best market for fresh produce, was a step towards rebuilding her identity. She started filling the empty apartment. She didn't buy expensive designer furniture. Instead, she explored the antique markets and artisan workshops of the Oltrarno. She bought a sturdy wooden dining table, mismatched chairs, a comfortable armchair for the living room. She filled the shelves with books and the kitchen with the smells of Italian cooking. And in her new leather journal, she began to sketch. At first, it was just buildings, the curve of the Duomo, the line of a bridge. But then she started sketching other things. A handbag she'd seen in a shop window, but with a more functional interior. A wallet with a clever, secure clasp. Her architect's mind, dormant for so long, began to stir, applying its principles of form and function to new ideas. One evening, standing on her terrace, she looked out at the city lights twinkling against the deep indigo of the Tuscan sky. The fog had lifted. Her son kicked inside her, a strong, reassuring presence. The grief was still there, a quiet ache in the background, but it was no longer all-consuming. It was joined by something else, a fragile, tentative, but undeniable sense of hope. She had survived the demolition. Now it was time to start building. The final months of Ava's pregnancy unfolded with the quiet rhythm of Florentine life. Winter softened into a cool, bright spring. The skeletal trees along the Arno sprouted tender green leaves. In the city's mood lightened. Ava's belly grew round and firm, a constant, tangible reminder of the future she was fighting for. Her days settled into a routine. Mornings were for Italian lessons at a small school near the Piazza Santo Spirito. Afternoons were for exploring, for building her home, and for sketching. The journal Mr. Bianchi had sold her was now almost full. It was overflowing with designs for handbags, briefcases, and travel accessories. They were born from her own needs, a tote with a protected laptop sleeve and easily accessible pockets for baby supplies. A diaper bag that looked like a chic, minimalist satchel, a travel wallet that could hold passports, currencies, and boarding passes securely. Each design was a solution to a problem, blending elegant aesthetics with the ruthless functionality her architect's brain demanded. She found herself frequently returning to Mr. Bianchi's small leather workshop. She would watch him for hours, fascinated by his skill. He worked with an economy of movement that spoke of a lifetime of practice, his gnarled hands transforming stiff sheets of leather into objects of supple beauty. He never seemed to mind her presence. They developed a quiet friendship, communicating in a mix of her improving Italian and his limited English. One afternoon, she gathered her courage and showed him her journal. She spread it open on his workbench, her heart pounding. It felt more intimate than showing someone a diary. Lorenzo Bianchi took off his glasses, polished them with a cloth, and put them back on. He turned the pages slowly, his craftsman's eye taking in every detail. He was silent for a long time, his expression unreadable. Ava felt a flush of embarrassment, suddenly certain he found her drawings amateurish and silly. Finally, he looked up, his gaze direct. "These are not just pretty pictures," he said, tapping a detailed sketch of a convertible backpack. "This has good bones, the structure is right, the balance. You think like a builder, not just an artist." Tears pricked Ava's eyes. It was the first time in years anyone had acknowledged that part of her. "I used to be an architect," she said softly. "Ah," he nodded, as if that explained everything. "This I can see. So, Signora Architetto, what do you plan to do with these good bones?" "I don't know," she admitted. "It's just an idea." "Ideas are seeds," he said, closing the journal and handing it back to her. "But they do not grow on paper. They need soil. They need work." That conversation planted a seed in Ava's own mind. What if this wasn't just a hobby? What if it could be something more? The divorce settlement was still being viciously contested. While Robert Davies had secured her a generous monthly stipend from the frozen assets, Ava hated being dependent on Nate's money. The thought of building something of her own, something that belonged to her and her son, was a powerful motivator. In April, 2 weeks before her due date, the divorce was finalized. Nate, facing a PR nightmare and the prospect of a long, ugly public trial that would expose his infidelity in excruciating detail, finally agreed to settle. It was a staggering sum, a number that would ensure she and her son would be secure for life. But when Robert Davies called her with the news, Ava felt not elation, but a profound sense of release. It wasn't the money that mattered, it was the freedom. The final legal tie to Nathaniel Forrester was severed. She was Ava Christensen again, in name and in spirit. 2 weeks later, on a warm spring morning, with the scent of wisteria drifting in through the open window of her hospital room, Oliver Nicholas Christensen was born. He was small and perfect, with a tuft of dark hair and his mother's serious, watchful eyes. Holding her son for the first time, Ava felt a love so fierce and absolute it eclipsed everything else. The grief, the anger, the betrayal, it all faded into the background, replaced by an overwhelming sense of purpose. This tiny, helpless human was her world now. Every decision, every risk, every triumph would be for him. The first few months of motherhood were a whirlwind of sleepless nights, endless feedings, and profound joy. Ava navigated it alone, but she never felt lonely. Oliver was her constant companion. She would strap him into a carrier and walk for miles through the Boboli Gardens, whispering to him about the statues and the flowers. As Oliver grew, so did the idea that had taken root in her mind. With a baby, her need for functional, well-designed accessories became even more acute. She was tired of carrying a flimsy diaper bag, a separate purse, and a laptop case. She wanted one beautiful, intelligent bag that could do it all. The design she had shown Mr. Bianchi, the convertible backpack, became her obsession. When Oliver was 4 months old, she went back to the workshop. "Mr. Bianchi," she said, her voice firm with a new resolve, "I don't want my ideas to stay on paper. I want to make one. This one." She pointed to the design. "Can you help me? I will pay you for your time and materials, of course." Lorenzo looked at her, then at the baby sleeping peacefully in the carrier on her chest. A slow smile spread across his face, crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Payment is not the issue," he said. "The issue is respect. For the leather, for the craft. You have this respect. I will not help you. I will teach you." And so began her apprenticeship. Ava would bring Oliver to the workshop, setting up a playpen in a quiet corner. While he napped or played, she learned. Lorenzo taught her how to select the right hides, the difference between vegetable-tanned and chrome-tanned leather. He showed her how to cut patterns with precision, how to skive the edges, how to stitch by hand with a saddle stitch that was far stronger than any machine's. Her hands, once accustomed to drafting pens and computer mice, grew strong and calloused. She made mistakes. She ruined expensive pieces of leather. She bled from pricked fingers. But she never gave up. Under Lorenzo's watchful eye, she was not just building a bag, she was rebuilding herself. Each perfect stitch was an act of creation, a tangible piece of her new life. After 2 months of painstaking work, the first prototype was complete. It was a backpack made of rich, chestnut-colored calfskin with clean lines and custom-designed brass hardware. The straps could be reconfigured to wear it as a shoulder bag or a crossbody. The interior was a marvel of organization, with padded sleeves, insulated pockets, and a detachable clutch. She named it the Oliver. She wore it everywhere, and people noticed. A woman stopped her in a cafe, another at the market. "Where did you get your bag? It's incredible." The compliments were validating, but the real test came when a stylish American tourist, the owner of a string of high-end boutiques in California, saw it. "I have been looking for a bag like that for 10 years, the woman said, her eyes wide with appreciation. "Who is the designer?" "I am," Ava said, a thrill running through her. "Do you sell them?" the woman asked, pulling out a business card. "Because if you do, I want to place an order. For 50. Ava stared at the business card in her hand. 50 bags. It was an impossible number. She was just one woman working in a corner of an old man's workshop. But then she looked down at Oliver, babbling happily in his stroller, and she thought of the empty life she'd fled. Fear was a luxury she had left behind in New York. She looked back at the boutique owner, a confident smile spreading across her face. "I can do that," she said. "Let's talk." The order for 50 bags was both a validation and a monumental challenge. It transformed Ava's passion project into a fledgling business overnight. The quiet, therapeutic rhythm of her apprenticeship with Lorenzo was shattered by the urgent reality of production deadlines, supply chains, and cash flow. 50 is not one, Lorenzo stated gravely, looking at the order form. This is a factory's work. We are a workshop. Then we become a bigger workshop, Ava declared, a spark of the old Forrester-level ambition igniting within her. She wasn't just building a bag anymore. She was building a company. Using a portion of her settlement money, an investment in herself, Ava rented the vacant space next to Lorenzo's workshop. They knocked down a wall, doubling their floor space. She purchased 2 industrial sewing machines and several large workbenches. She hired 2 of Lorenzo's former apprentices, skilled artisans who had left the trade for more stable work, convincing them to return with the promise of good wages and creative respect. Ava named her company AC Firenze, simple, elegant, rooted in her identity and her new home. The next few months were a crucible. Ava worked 18-hour days fueled by espresso and sheer determination. She was a mother, a designer, a CEO, and a factory floor manager all at once. Oliver was a permanent fixture at the workshop, his playpen often surrounded by scraps of leather and the sound of humming machines. He learned to crawl on the dusty floor and took his first steps while holding on to a roll of caramel-colored suede. Ava was involved in every step. She sourced the finest leather from a family-owned tannery in Tuscany. She designed and commissioned custom hardware from a local metalworker, refusing to use stock buckles and clasps. She obsessed over quality control, personally inspecting every single bag before it was packaged. Lorenzo, who had initially been skeptical, became her most trusted advisor and head of production, his gruff exterior belying a fierce pride in what they were creating. They made the deadline. The 50 Oliver bags were shipped to California. Ava was so exhausted she barely had the energy to feel triumphant. She paid her team, paid her suppliers, and collapsed, wondering if the immense effort had been worth it. 2 weeks later, she got her answer. The boutique owner called, her voice electric with excitement. Ava, the bags are gone. They sold out in 3 days. I have a waiting list of over 200 people. I need another 100 as soon as you can make them. That was the turning point. The trickle became a flood. An influential fashion blogger on a trip to Florence stumbled upon the workshop, which now had a small, elegant storefront. She bought an Oliver, wrote a glowing post about the brilliant new designer blending American functionality with Italian craftsmanship, and the AC Firenze website, which Ava had painstakingly built herself, crashed from the traffic. Orders poured in from around the world: London, Tokyo, Dubai, and ironically, New York. Ava had to rapidly expand. She hired more artisans, a customer service manager who spoke 5 languages, and a logistics expert to handle international shipping. The workshop expanded again, taking over another adjacent storefront. AC Firenze became known for 3 things: impeccable quality, intelligent design, and a powerful brand story. It wasn't just about luxury handbags. It was about empowering women. The marketing, which Ava directed herself, featured real women, doctors, entrepreneurs, mothers, artists, not supermodels. The bags were tools for their busy, complex lives. The story of the brand's founder, though she kept the personal details of her divorce private, was hinted at. An American woman who had started over in Florence, building a company from scratch with her son by her side. It resonated deeply with her customers. Within 2 years, AC Firenze was a multi-million-dollar company. Ava was no longer just surviving. She was thriving. She had moved out of the small apartment and bought a beautiful villa in the hills above the city, with a garden where Oliver could play and a studio for herself with sweeping views of Florence. She was a respected member of the local business community, known for her sharp mind, her fair treatment of employees, and her unwavering commitment to quality. She had built a life more fulfilling than she could have ever imagined in her New York penthouse. She had her son, her work, and a deep sense of peace. She rarely thought of Nate. He was a ghost from a different lifetime, a character in a book she had long since finished reading, but the past she was about to learn is never truly finished with you, especially when that past has a billion-dollar ego and a bruised sense of ownership. One sun-drenched Tuesday afternoon, as Ava was reviewing new designs in her sunlit office above the bustling workshop, her assistant buzzed her on the intercom, her voice tight with shock. "Ava," she said, "there is a man here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment. He says his name is Nathaniel Forrester. The name hung in the air for a moment, an invasive species in the clean, creative atmosphere of her Florence headquarters. Ava felt a jolt, not of fear, but of profound irritation. It was like finding a cockroach in a pristine kitchen. She had built this sanctuary, this world for herself and her son, brick by brick, stitch by stitch, and he had dared to just show up at her door. "Tell him I'm not available," she said, her voice colder than she expected. "I tried," her assistant Sophia replied, her voice hushed. "He said he will wait. He's very insistent. Ava, there's a woman with him." Ava's blood ran cold. Kendall. Of course, it was a power play, a two-pronged assault. She took a deep, steadying breath. Running and hiding was what the old Ava would have done. The new Ava, the CEO of AC Forensi, met challenges head-on. "Fine," she said, standing up and smoothing down her linen dress. "Send them into the main conference room. And Sophia, bring in 2 glasses of water. Nothing else." The conference room was her design, a large oak table, comfortable leather chairs, her own design, and a floor-to-ceiling window overlooking the workshop floor, where her team of artisans was diligently working. It was a room that radiated quiet power and transparency. Nate was standing by the window, his back to the door, looking down at the workshop. He was still handsome, still impeccably dressed in a suit that probably cost more than her first month's rent in Florence. But there was something different about him, a tightness around his eyes, a tension in his shoulders that hadn't been there before. Kendall Monroe was seated at the table, her legs crossed, a blood-red designer bag placed pointedly in front of her. She looked as polished and severe as ever, but there was a brittle quality to her smile as Ava entered. "Ava," Nate said, turning around. He spread his hands in a gesture that was meant to be warm and open. "You look incredible. Motherhood, Italy. It all agrees with you." "Nathaniel," Ava said, her tone flat, businesslike. She didn't acknowledge Kendall. "This is a surprise. I wasn't aware you had an appointment. I was in Rome for business. I couldn't be this close and not see you." "And Oliver," he added, a flicker of something she couldn't decipher in his eyes. "Our son." "My son is at his preschool," Ava said coolly, "and his life is very happy and very stable. I intend to keep it that way." Kendall let out a small, condescending laugh. "Still so dramatic, I see." Ava finally turned her gaze to Kendall, her eyes sweeping over her with a detached air of appraisal, as if inspecting a piece of flawed leather. "And you are still here. I see Nate enjoys consistency." The jab hit its mark. A flash of anger crossed Kendall's face. "That's enough," Nate said, stepping between them. "Ava, I came here to talk, to apologize, in person. The way I handled things was wrong. I was arrogant. I was a fool. I lost the best thing that ever happened to me." His voice was low and sincere, the same voice that had once convinced her of his undying love. But Ava was immune to its charms now. She could see the mechanics behind the performance. "Your apology is about 3 years too late, and frankly, irrelevant," Ava said, taking a seat at the head of the table, claiming the position of power. "What do you want, Nate?" He sighed, sitting down opposite her. "I want to be a father to my son. I want to be in his life. I'll set up a trust fund for him. Anything you want. I want him to know his family, his heritage." "His heritage?" Ava asked, raising an eyebrow. "You mean the Forrester name? The one associated with hostile takeovers and, more recently, a messy public divorce due to infidelity? No, thank you. He has a wonderful heritage right here in Florence, one built on integrity and hard work." Nate's jaw tightened. This wasn't going the way he had planned. He was used to people folding under the pressure of his presence and his wealth. "This company you've built," he said, changing tactics, gesturing around the room. "It's impressive, truly. I've seen your numbers. You've done well for yourself." It was meant as a compliment, but it sounded like a landlord praising a tenant for keeping the apartment clean. "I'm glad you approve," she said dryly. "I could help you," he pressed on, leaning forward. "Forrester Industries could take you global in 6 months. A strategic partnership. We could open flagship stores in New York, London, Paris. Think of the scale, Ava. You're a boutique brand. I could make you a global powerhouse." Ava stared at him, and for the first time she felt a sliver of pity. He couldn't comprehend it. He couldn't understand that she didn't want what he was offering. His entire worldview was transactional. Everything and everyone had a price. "Let me be very clear," she said, her voice low and steady. "AC Forensi is not for sale. It is not seeking investors, and it will never, under any circumstances, be associated with you or your company. This brand is built on authenticity. A partnership with you would be the death of it." Nate's face darkened. The mask of contrition was gone, replaced by the raw, wounded pride of a thwarted emperor. "You would deny your son that kind of legacy? Out of spite?" "I'm not denying him anything," Ava shot back. "I'm protecting him, and myself. Now, if that's all, you've wasted enough of my time." She stood to leave, but Kendall's voice, sharp as broken glass, stopped her. "He's not telling you the whole story, Ava," Kendall said, a venomous smile on her lips as she looked at Nate. "Kendall, shut up," Nate warned, his voice a low growl. But Kendall was on her feet now, energized by the conflict. "No, I don't think I will. You see, he didn't just come here to see his long-lost son. Forrester Industries is bleeding. That Axiom deal, the one he was so proud of, it was a disaster. The tech was faulty, and they're facing massive lawsuits. His business in Rome was a failed attempt to secure a bailout from European investors." Ava watched, stunned as the scene unraveled before her. "He doesn't want to partner with you," Kendall continued, her voice rising with a cruel glee. "He wants to acquire you. A profitable, stable, feel-good brand like yours would be a lifeline for his shareholders. It would look good on paper. This whole thing, the apology, the Fatherhood Act, it's just a negotiation tactic." Nate looked at Kendall with pure hatred. "I told you to wait in the car." "And I told you I was tired of waiting," Kendall spat back. "He promised me the world, Ava. Marriage, a place at the company. He told me you were a fragile, simple woman who wouldn't be able to cope after the divorce. He told me you'd come crawling back. Instead, you built this." She gestured around the room with a sweep of her hand, a look of bitter admiration on her face. "And me? I'm still the other woman, the convenient affair he trots out when he needs to. He was lying to you, and he was lying to me." The room was silent except for the faint, steady sounds of the workshop below. In that moment, Ava saw Nate for what he truly was: a hollow man, a shell of charisma and ambition, utterly incapable of genuine connection. He used people like assets and discarded them when they no longer served a purpose. Ava looked from Nate's furious face to Kendall's tear-streaked, defiant one. She felt no triumph, no satisfaction, just a vast, empty sadness for the damage he had wrought. "Sophia," Ava said into the intercom on the table, "please show Mr. Forrester and Ms. Monroe out." She looked directly at Nate, her eyes clear and unwavering. "My lawyers will be in touch regarding a formal visitation schedule for Oliver to take place here in Florence under supervision, if and when I deem it appropriate. Now get out of my office." Nate stared at her, his empire crumbling around him, defeated not by a business rival, but by the fragile, simple woman he had so casually underestimated. Without another word, he turned and walked out. Kendall, after a moment's hesitation, gathered her purse and followed him, leaving a faint trail of expensive, bitter perfume in her wake. Ava stood by the window and watched them get into a black car and drive away, two ghosts disappearing from her life for good. She felt nothing, and that nothing was the most powerful feeling in the world. It was the feeling of being completely and utterly free. 5 years later, Ava Christensen was not a survivor. She was a sovereign. Her company, AC Forensi, had become a global symbol of intelligent luxury, with flagship stores in London, Tokyo, and a particularly triumphant location on Madison Avenue. She ran her empire from Florence, having built a world where she was defined not by a man's betrayal, but by her own vision and tenacity. Her greatest success, however, was now 8 years old. Oliver was a bright, joyful boy, fluent in English and Italian, with his mother's thoughtful eyes. His world was the sun-drenched garden of their hillside villa, the scent of leather from the workshop, and the unwavering certainty of his mother's love. Nate Forrester was a footnote. His company had crumbled under the weight of his arrogance and bad deals, and his name had faded from the headlines. His awkward, semi-annual visits to Florence were a strange ritual that Oliver endured with polite indifference. His father was a visitor, his mother was his home. One warm September evening, Ava sat on their terrace, watching the sunset paint the sky in hues of rose and gold over the Florentine skyline. Oliver sat beside her, sketching the Duomo in his notebook. "Look, Mama," he said, holding up his work. "I'm getting better." "It's wonderful, tesoro mio," she said, pulling him into a hug. "You have an architect's eye." He beamed, leaning his head against her arm as the city lights began to sparkle below. Ava looked at the view, the same one that had once seemed so daunting, and thought of the terrified woman who had arrived here with nothing but a broken heart and a secret strength. The pain felt like a story about someone else. There was no anger left for Nate, only a distant pity for the hollow life he had chosen. She had built this, a life of her own design, on a foundation of her own making. As she held her son, surrounded by the beauty of the city that had saved her, she felt a profound and unshakable peace. She had lost a fairy tale marriage, but she had gained the entire world, and it was a world she had built herself. Ava's journey is a powerful testament to the idea that our deepest wounds can often become the blueprints for our greatest strengths. She transformed a devastating betrayal into the foundation for a new life, proving that true wealth isn't measured in billions of dollars, but in independence, integrity, and the freedom to build your own destiny. Her story isn't just about catching a cheating husband. It's about what happens after. It's about refusing to be a victim, picking up the pieces, and building not just a business, but a legacy. Have you ever felt underestimated or had to start over when you thought your life was set? Ava's story reminds us all that the end of one chapter is often the beginning of a much better one. If her incredible journey from heartbreak to head of an empire moved you, please give this video a like and share it with someone who might need a reminder of their own strength. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more true life stories of resilience and triumph. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an update. Thank you for listening.